They fed off your misery, not in secret, not with guilt, but openly, shamelessly, with grins stretched across their faces. Your suffering was their entertainment. Every wound you carried, every setback, every failure, it became their amusement. They spoke of you not as a man, but as a spectacle, a cautionary tale, a joke whispered between shallow minds desperate for something, anything, to make their own emptiness more bearable. You were the theater, the tragedy, the punchline. They laughed as you crumbled, mocked as you suffered, delighted in the idea that you would never escape the wreckage of your own pain. But they forgot something. The wheel always turns. The show always changes. And now, the script has flipped. Look at them now, shaken, silent, staring at the force they never saw coming. They do not laugh anymore. They do not whisper your name with arrogance, with mockery, with the certainty that you were finished. Their certainty has rotted into fear, because you were never broken, not truly. Bent, battered, buried, yes. But broken? Number, you did not stay down. You did not fade into the shadows of their expectations. You became the shadows. You learned the darkness, befriended the void, carved yourself into something they can no longer comprehend. And now, they feel it. The same pain they once used for their own pleasure. The same suffering they turned into entertainment. The same weight they mocked, as if it could never touch them. Ah, but that's the trick, isn't it? They thought they were immune. They thought cruelty was a game without consequences. They thought your suffering was isolated, a lonely little thing meant for you and you alone. But pain is not some rare affliction. It is not a disease, only the weak contract. No, no, no. Pain is the great equalizer, the silent reaper, the patient hand that never forgets. And now, its grip tightens around them. Now, their worlds unravel, their smiles fade, their laughter turns to echoes of what they used to be. They thought you would stay down forever, that they would always have the luxury of watching you struggle while they sat in comfort. But life has a cruel sense of irony, doesn't it? You did not seek revenge. You did not need to. The universe is a far better executioner than you could ever be. It has a way of ensuring that every smirk, every sneer, every ounce of amusement they wrung from your suffering returns to them in full measure. Not through you, not by your hand, but by the nature of existence itself. You see, people like them never escape the thing they fear most, themselves. They laughed at your struggles because they were terrified of their own. They mocked your pain because it made them forget their own. But their turn has come, and there is no audience now. No one left to laugh at them. Do you hear it? The silence, the absence of their voices, the quiet where their mockery used to be. That silence is the sound of realization creeping into their bones, the understanding that they were never above suffering, that the pain they once found so amusing was always waiting for them, lingering in the shadows, biding its time. And when it arrived, no one stood by their side. No one reached out a hand. No one cared. Because why would they? They taught the world to see suffering as entertainment. And now, the world watches them with the same cold indifference they once reserved for you. But here's the real question. What will you do now? Will you revel in their downfall? Will you laugh as they once did? Will you become the very thing they were? Number, that would be too easy. That would be their path, the path of the weak, the insecure, the ones who never truly had power to begin with. You do not need to laugh at them. You do not need to mock or jeer or waste your breath on proving a point. Your existence is the point. Your rise, your evolution, your transformation. That is the wound they will never recover from. They do not need you to destroy them. They are already doing that themselves. The same way they once relied on your pain to give them purpose, they now drown in the absence of something to mock. And as they suffocate in the weight of their own irrelevance, you rise above it all, untouchable, unconcerned, free. You have transcended their reach, their judgments, their petty games. You are not their puppet anymore. You are the one writing the story now. And in this version, they are background noise, a forgotten chapter, dust in the wind. So let them sit in their misery. Let them wrestle with the reality they once mocked. Let them watch as you walk forward, indifferent to their suffering, not because you lack compassion, but because they are no longer worth your attention. They never were. You were always the main act. They were just the audience. And now the theater is empty. The show is over. And the beauty of it all, you don't even have to watch. You've got better things to do. Pain has always been a spectacle. It is the oldest form of entertainment, the cruelest form of validation. People gather around suffering like hyenas at a fresh kill, not to help, not to understand, but to feed. They gorge themselves on the misery of others, using it as a mirror to reflect their own superiority, their own comfort, their own perceived safety. They see another's downfall and tell themselves, at least it's not me. That is the core of their twisted pleasure. They take your suffering and mold it into their reassurance, their ego boost, their personal proof that they are on higher ground. Your agony is their pedestal, your failures, their amusement. But all illusions crumble, all delusions shatter. And when the tables turn, when they are the ones sinking, when they are the ones bleeding, the laughter dies. That pleasure they once bathed in curdles into panic, because now they are the ones on display. They always believed they were untouchable, as if pain was something reserved for the weak, as if the universe had granted them immunity, as if their laughter placed them above the chaos of suffering. But suffering does not discriminate. It moves like a tide, washing over the smug and the broken alike. And when that tide shifts, when the weight of existence crashes down on their fragile little world, their faces go pale, their hands tremble, their voices break. They spend so much time laughing at the pain of others that they never prepared for their own. They mocked the wounded without realizing they were building the gallows for themselves. And now, as they stand in the very same fire they once found so amusing, they realize something horrifying. No one is coming to save them. The world they shaped has no mercy. They trained it to laugh at pain, to dismiss suffering, to see hardship as something beneath them. And now as they choke on their own medicine, they look around for sympathy, for understanding, for relief. But there is none. The same way they looked down on the broken, the world now looks down on them. Their cries for help sound a lot like the pleas they once ignored. Their desperation is nothing more than background noise to those who have already endured what they are only now beginning to taste. They thought they were better. They thought they were untouchable. But now, they understand the truth. They were never above suffering. They were merely delayed. Watch them scramble. Watch them try to rewrite history, to soften their past cruelty, to excuse their past laughter. They want to believe they were never that bad, that they never mocked the weak, that they were never part of the problem. But memory is unforgiving, and the echoes of their own voices haunt them. They remember the times they sneered at someone's misfortune, the times they rolled their eyes at someone's struggle, the times they turned pain into a joke. And now, as they sit in the ruins of their own arrogance, they realize what they have become, a joke themselves. There is a specific type of fear that takes hold of a person when they realize their past self has sentenced them to their present suffering. It is the fear of knowing that the world has no obligation to forgive, no reason to extend kindness, no incentive to offer a hand. They are alone in the same darkness they once laughed at. And that is when the panic sets in, because for the first time, they understand what it feels like to be on the other side, to be helpless, to be the one others watch, whispering, judging, dismissing. And unlike the people they mocked, they are not built to withstand it. Because the ones they ridiculed, the ones who suffered first, they adapted. They had no choice. They grew strong in the fire, learned to endure, sharpened themselves into something unbreakable. But these fools, these fragile little creatures who once thrived on the misery of others, they have never known hardship. They have never been tested. And now, in their moment of reckoning, they break, they beg, they shatter. They never expected to taste the pain they once weaponized. And now that it has come for them, it devours them whole. It is poetic, really. The ones who took joy in suffering are always the ones least equipped to survive it. They collapse under the weight of their own arrogance, crushed by the very force they once trivialized. They scream for the mercy they never gave. They demand the understanding they never offered. They curse the same fate they once laughed at in others. And yet, they fail to see the simplest truth. This was always coming for them. No one is above suffering. No one is beyond consequence. And when you build your joy on the misery of others, you are merely building a foundation for your own destruction. You do not need to watch them suffer. You do not need to revel in their downfall. That is their nature, not yours. You simply walk away. Let them drown in the emptiness they once celebrated. Let them sit in the silence where laughter used to be. Have you ever noticed how people pretend to be compassionate until real pain enters the equation? They will claim to be kind, supportive, empathetic, until they see someone struggling. Then, their first instinct is not to help, but to rationalize. Why is this person suffering? What did they do wrong? Surely they brought this upon themselves. Because if suffering is self-inflicted, if it is the result of poor choices, then they are safe. Then they will never have to endure what you endured. That is why they laughed at you. Not because they hated you, not because they were stronger, but because they needed to believe that suffering was avoidable, that it only happened to the weak, the foolish, the unworthy. That belief was their armor. And now, that armor is gone. There is no quicker way to dismantle arrogance than to let reality do what it does best: correct the delusional. They spent so long treating pain as a form of entertainment, failing to realize that the roles could be reversed in an instant. Now, it is their turn. And here's the irony. They do not understand why it is happening to them. You, at least, had the clarity of knowing you were suffering. They, on the other hand, were never prepared. They thought they had immunity. And so, when life inevitably turns its merciless eye upon them, they are not just suffering, they are in shock. Panic is a curious thing. It unravels people in ways they never expected. You will see it now, in their eyes, in their movements, in the way they search for someone to save them. But here's the problem. They never built those lifelines. When they mocked you, dismissed you, ignored your struggles, they were unknowingly severing their own safety nets. And now that they are drowning, there is no one left to throw them a rope. No one pities the tormentor when they finally taste torment. No one rushes to the aid of those who once laughed at another's pain. They cheered when you walked into the arena, but only because they wanted to see you fall. That is the nature of the crowd. It does not seek honor. It does not value struggle. It feeds on spectacle. The moment you step onto the battlefield, they are no longer with you. You are entertainment, a fleeting distraction from their own insignificance. When you bleed, they do not weep. They do not mourn. They revel in it. It makes them feel safe, knowing that it is you suffering under the weight of the sword, not them. That is the essence of the spectacle. So long as they are watching from the stands, they are not the ones at risk. And so, they chant for more, eager to see how much agony you can endure before your knees buckle, before the dirt drinks your blood, before you are reduced to a fallen warrior, forgotten by the very same mouths that once shouted your name. But the moment you rise, the moment you lift your blade with vengeance in your eyes, their energy shifts. The jeers waver. The laughter dies. They do not cheer for your resilience. Not yet. First, they hesitate. Because now, you are no longer a victim of the arena. You are something else entirely. Something dangerous. And the crowd does not know whether to fear or admire what they see before them. When you bled, they dismissed you. When you fell, they turned their backs. But when you rise, not as a broken man, but as something reborn, now they take notice. This is the truth they never tell you. People only respect strength when it is undeniable. They only admire the gladiator when he becomes something more than a man, when he transcends pain, when he turns suffering into a weapon sharper than any steel. Until that moment, they treat you as expendable. They do not care about your struggle. They do not care about your journey. They do not care about the nights you spent clawing your way back from the brink of defeat. They only care about the final image. The man standing, victorious, unshaken, untamed. They rewrite their opinions the moment you prove them wrong, pretending they always believed in you, as if their earlier mockery never existed. But you remember, and you do not forget. The arena of life is not fair. It was never meant to be. You are thrown into battles you did not choose, against enemies you did not provoke, while the crowd watches, indifferent to your fate. They do not see the weight you carry, the scars beneath the armor, the exhaustion behind your eyes. They only see whether you fall or whether you stand. And when you stand, they scramble to justify it. How did he survive? How did he rise when we counted him out? And then, the most important question of all, what will he do next? Because now, the game has changed. The gladiator they once pitied is now a force they cannot ignore. They do not mock him anymore. They do not whisper about his inevitable downfall. Instead, they study him. They watch his movements. They try to predict his next strike. Because now, he is dangerous. He has seen the worst of battle, endured the deepest of wounds, and yet he rises still. There is an arrogance in those who have never been tested, a sickness of the mind that convinces them they are untouchable, immune to the suffering they mock in others. They walk with the confidence of the unscathed, the deluded certainty of those who have never faced true adversity. They mistake luck for strength, comfort for wisdom, circumstance for superiority. And so, when they see someone struggling, someone drowning, someone bleeding in the dirt, they assume it is final, that suffering is proof of weakness, that pain is synonymous with failure, that those who fall will never rise again. But this is the mistake of the untested. They have never felt the weight of the abyss. They have never been forced to crawl through the wreckage of their own existence. And because of this, they have no concept of what survival truly means. They assume drowning means submission, that once a man is under, he will stay there, that there is no fight left in the broken, no fire in the fallen, no breath in the submerged. But they do not understand the nature of those forged in hardship. They have never witnessed the way a drowning man becomes something else, a force that no longer cares for rules, for expectations, for the laws of the weak. A man who has touched the bottom of the ocean is no longer afraid of water. A man who has endured the silence of his own destruction no longer fears the noise of the world. And so, when he resurfaces, when he returns, he is not the same. He is not soft. He is not kind. He is not interested in the opinions of those who never knew what it meant to fight for air. Those who have never suffered assume that struggle is the end, that once you fall, you stay down. They believe this because it comforts them, because it allows them to keep their illusions intact. If suffering is a death sentence, then they are safe, because they have not suffered. If drowning is the end, then they are untouchable, because they have never felt the pull of the deep. But when they see a man who has survived, a man who was swallowed by the abyss and emerged stronger, colder, untamed, it terrifies them, because it shatters their understanding of the world. It forces them to confront the reality they ignored. Pain does not mean death. It means transformation. They think the worst thing that can happen to a man is suffering. But they are wrong. The worst thing that can happen is never suffering at all. Because the untested remain fragile. They have never had to sharpen their edges. They have never had to develop endurance. And so, when their time comes, when life finally decides to test them, they will break. They will scream for mercy. They will drown, and no one will save them, because they never learned how to save themselves. They spent their lives mocking those who struggled, convinced they were above such things. And when the weight of existence finally crashes down on them, they will not know how to breathe under it. You, on the other hand, have already drowned before. You have already felt the pressure of the deep, the crushing weight of despair, the silence of isolation. And you survived. You adapted. You grew gills when the air ran out. You clawed your way through the suffocating darkness and found light where there was none. The untested do not understand this kind of survival. They assume that because they have never fallen, they never will. But what they fail to grasp is that the ground is waiting for everyone. Their turn will come. And when it does, they will have no idea what to do. They will call you cruel for not helping them. They will accuse you of being heartless for refusing to extend the mercy they never showed you. But this is not about cruelty. It is about justice. They laughed at suffering until they became the ones suffering. They mocked the drowning man until they became the ones gasping for air. And now, they want the same strength they once ridiculed. But that is not how this works. Strength is not handed out like charity. It is earned through fire, through pain, through trial. And they have never been willing to endure any of it. When they fall, they will expect someone to catch them. They will wait for the helping hand, for the savior, for the easy way out. But no one is coming, because no one came for you. And that is the difference between you and them. You never needed to be saved. You became your own salvation. You did not beg for relief. You did not pray for someone to carry you through the storm. You became the storm. You learned how to survive. And now, as they writhe in the agony they never prepared for, you will watch, not in cruelty, not in pity, but in certainty, because you know something they never did. Struggle is not the end. It is the beginning. The arrogance of the untested is their own undoing. They spent their lives believing they were superior because they never had to fight. But strength does not come from avoidance. It comes from war, and you endured it.